I uncovered 8 unforgettable family massacres that will haunt your dreams for sure. I never should have opened that door. It loomed in the dim hallway, just a sliver of shadowed passage. The air felt heavy, like a thick blanket. My heart raced. Curiosity tugged at me, even though dread whispered warnings in my EAR.my routine had been simple, everyday life. I woke up to coffee brewing, the clock ticking away. Sunlight poured through the window, painting comfort on my walls. Everything was normal until I stumbled upon that door. It was old, chipped, a deep mahogany stain now faded. I took a breath. Something called to me. I stepped closer, the chill in the air tingling my skin. The cold radiated from the wood, sending shivers down my spine. I felt a prickling at the back of my neck. Was that a whisper? The shadows danced, swirling in the corners of the room. I shook my head, it was just my imagination. But then I heard it again. A soft noise, like fingernails tapping on glass. My pulse quickened. I grabbed the handle, it felt sticky under my palm. The whispers swelled, echoing off the walls. Faces flashed in my mind, each more haunting than the last. 8 families, torn apart, their stories woven into the fabric of that cursed room. One massacre more grisly than the next. Blood, screams, chaos. I could almost taste the metal in the air. The darkness deepened, wrapping around me. Something moved near the edge of my vision. I caught sight of a shadow leaping across the room. Goosebumps prickled my skin. My breath hitched. I wanted to run, I wanted to scream. Instead, I twisted the handle and pushed the door open. Creaking, it groaned, revealing a space thick with dust and despair. The smell sour and moldy hit me hard. It was as if the room had been sealed for years. My stomach churned. A dried-out doll lay in the corner, its button eyes staring back at me, filled with a tragic promise. I stepped inside, curiosity battling with terror. Then, a loud crash echoed behind me. I whipped around, heart pounding. The door slammed shut. Panic surged through me like electricity. I was trapped. The shadows thickened, swirling around me. I could feel something watching, lurking just out of sight. I took a shaky step back, but my foot slipped on something wet. It was dark, thick liquid pooling beneath me. I gasped, my fingers clawing for the door, but it wouldn't budge. The whispers rose to a crescendo, a cacophony of long-dead voices. I felt them closing in. The darkness quivered. And then, I saw it. A figure emerged from the shadows. Cold dread filled my chest as I let out a scream. And in that instant, everything went black. Hey, before we continue with this amazing story, I need to give you an important heads up. Many subscribers have reported that YouTube unsubscribed them without warning. Take a quick second to check the red button below to make sure you're still subscribed to the channel. I'd hate for you to miss any of the exclusive content coming soon. And while you're there, smash that like button, it really helps me out with the algorithm. Oh, and tell me in the comments, which city are you watching from? I love getting to know every amazing person who's part of this community. Your participation makes all the difference. Let's connect. I jolted awake, my body slamming against the cold floor. My heart thundered in my ears as I blinked against the suffocating darkness that engulfed me. The air was stale, heavy with the weight of countless, unseen souls. Panic clawed at my throat as I gasped for breath, feet scrambling on the cold, slick surface beneath me. The realization sent waves of nausea crashing over me. I was still in that horrid room. The whispers resumed, more distinct now, weaving a dreadful symphony that pierced the quiet. I squeezed my eyes shut, trying to block them out, but they flowed into my consciousness like oil pooling around a flame, inviting yet terrifying. Each voice held a sorrowful tale, flickering like candlelight through fog. "Help us," one pleaded, soft like a breeze. "They won't let us go," another hissed with venom. I felt their despair, a suffocating cloak that wrapped tighter around my chest. With a surge of adrenaline, I forced myself to sit up. My fingers brushed against the gruesome puddle that had pulled me down. The texture turned my stomach, and I recoiled but caught a glimpse of something reflecting in the murky mass. Tiny fragments of glass glimmered like trapped stars, swirling in the darkness. I squinted, and horror struck me like lightning. It wasn't just glass. Broken shards of pictures lay scattered within it. Was as if fragments of lives had been deliberately trapped in that dark liquid. That I reached forward, trembling, drawn to a tattered photo framed in a cracked piece of glass. The fading image depicted a cheerful family, smiles bright against the ominous backdrop of what looked like my own home. The uncanny familiarity tugged at my mind. Something deep within warned me that this family, like the others that had crossed these cursed thresholds, had met an end far from joyous. My fingers brushed the picture, and an icy jolt shot through me, flooding my vision with fleeting images, scenes of violence, fire, and blood-curdling screams. No. I gasped, jerking my hand back, but it was too late. The images had consumed me, embedding themselves into my very soul, visions of a massacre that played out like a morbid film reel. I felt a presence tightening around my throat, a malevolent force feeding on my fear. The room pulsed, and I realized I was not alone. Echoes of past torment surged forth from every shadow, alive with an insatiable hunger. Suddenly, the door behind me splintered open with a violent crash. Light flooded into the room, battling against the encroaching darkness, illuminating twisted shapes that grasped at the edge of my vision. Just outside the threshold stood a figure draped in black. Shadows clung to its form like a second skin, obscuring its features. There was something profoundly wrong about it. It felt less like a living being and more like a manifestation of my deepest fears. "Help us," the figure rasped, its voice a chilling blend of echo and shadow. I recoiled, pressing my back against the floor, frantically looking for an escape. Mirroring it, a dozen faces emerged from the dark corners, their mouths screaming wide, yet only silence poured forth. They yearned for salvation, connecting their anguish with mine, reminding me that I was tethered to their gruesome fate. That I scrambled backward, desperate to flee from that accursed room, but with every movement, the darkness surged toward me, thickening like a viscous sludge. The figure took a step forward, and I could make out its eyes, dark voids that promised endless despair. My heart raced wildly as I pushed against the forces gripping me. "You need to leave," I shouted, unsure who I was pleading to. The figure, the trapped souls, or myself. "Leave?" It laughed, a sound like stones grinding together. "You can't. You belong to us now." And with that, the figure reached out, fingers stretching toward me in a grotesque invitation. Suddenly, a shrill wail sliced through the cacophony of whispers, causing my blood to run cold. The wall beside me began to tremble, bulging outward as if it yearned to share its darkest secrets. I could almost hear the stories seep through, narratives painted in blood and pain as long-hidden memories clawed their way to the surface. My breathing quickened. I had to escape. The overpowering dread sat heavy in my chest, anchoring me in place, while the figure's grip of terror threatened to pull me into an abyss from which there would be no return. I turned back toward the shattered door, ready to leap into the light beyond, but just as I lunged, the floor beneath me crumbled, revealing a gaping chasm. My scream echoed into the night as the shadows reached for me, hungry and eternal. I felt myself plummet into the depths of despair, fate tethering me to the horrors that had come before. All the while, that dark figure laughed, a sound that would haunt me, resonating in the void long after all light disappeared. And as I fell, the last thing I heard was a faint, chilling whisper, "Welcome home." Darkness enveloped me as I fell, twisting and swirling in a tempest of memories and screams that echoed with a mind-numbing intensity. The sensation of weightlessness twisted in my gut, and I grappled with the thought of what awaited me in the abyss below. My heartbeat echoed in my ears as I braced for impact, but the descent never ended, the shadows stretching into infinity. I landed not with a bone-jarring thud, but softly, as if the darkness itself had cushioned my fall. Groaning, I pushed myself up from a cold, damp surface, my surroundings illuminated by a ghastly pale light that seemed to emerge from nowhere. The air was chilling, each breath sharp against my lungs, and memories flickered in my mind like the twisted visions I'd seen in that dreadful photograph that I was in a cavern, a vast underground chamber that pulsated with an uneasy life. The walls glistened, slick with viscous fluid that oozed from unseen crevices, and it was then I realized with startling clarity, I was not alone. Shapes writhed against the rocky expanse, dark figures twisting and mingling as if caught in a macabre dance. They were faces, shifting and contorting, remnants of lives extinguished in torment. Their mouths moved endlessly in silent screams, their eyes voids of anguish that saw straight through me. A part of me recognized them from the black shadows above, their blurry shapes now painfully defined by the glow surrounding me. Among them, a figure rose, its form distinct yet monstrous, rising as if conjured by my fear. It bore the semblance of a child, skin pallid and stretched taut over bone, empty eyes shining with an unholy light that told tales of lost innocence. "Why did you leave us? Don't you want to play?" it coaxed, voice like brittle leaves rustling in the wind. Every instinct screamed to run, yet I found myself rooted in place, ensnared by the insanity of its gaze. I felt a deep well of sadness pierce my heart, as the faces around me leaned closer, their unrelenting longing palpable in the air. I swallowed hard, forcing the words out, "What happened to you?" The child's smile flickered, twisting into something sinister. "The game isn't over. We were taken, just like you will be." The laughter danced around Mecheldish, haunting, echoing softly off damp walls. And with that, a rush of memories flooded my mind. The child had a name, Ella, and the warmth of her laugh turned ice-cold, conjuring images of a sunlit yard where smiles should have bloomed, but that laughter was now just a threadbare whisper seeking solace. Suddenly, the cavern trembled, and the faces recoiled in sync as shadows glided across the walls, their movements fluid and serpentine. A deeper darkness lurked beyond the feeble light, and I sensed something ancient and monstrous lurking within. The primordial dread returned, wrapping itself around my heart like a vice. The walls, pulsating as if alive, seemed to breathe, each heartbeat resonating with a rhythm too sinister to comprehend. With a jolt, I recognized the heaviness in the air. It was my own terror feeding the darkness, fueling the malevolence that hung over the ghastly gallery of lost souls. "You need to leave," I shouted, but the words tasted like ash in my mouth. The child's laughter turned to a dissonant chorus, then morphed into a cacophony of voices, chanting a refrain of despair. "You can't leave. You belong to us." They were right. I could feel it pull at my very essence, bindings tightening as they fed on my fears and memories. I stumbled back, limbs heavy with dread, searching for a way out, but just then, the ground quaked once more, and the darkness churned violently, swallowing the light. The sobs of the lost would soon engulf me, dragging me into this endless night if I didn't act fast. Gripping a jagged piece of stone, I steadied myself against the wall, eyes darting through the shadows in a desperate search for escape. With sudden clarity, I spotted a narrow passageway to my right, faintly illuminated, seeming to beckon me with hope. But before I could make a move, the child's voice emerged from the darkness once more, scratching against my mind. "Where do you think you're going?" A new horror unfurled before me as a massive shadow surged forth from the depths of the cave, a grotesque creature emerging, eyes ablaze with malicious hunger. Its features twisted in the light, a grim amalgamation of the faces surrounding me, each grotesque detail carved by torment and despair. "That we only want to play," it growled, stretching forward with gnarled fingers, the walls shivering in response. In that moment of terror, I chose to run, but as I darted for the passage, my foot caught on the slick ground and I stumbled, falling hard. I turned back, breathless, to face the fanged maw of darkness approaching. Palpable dread seized my heart as I realized with horrifying clarity I had awakened something more monstrous than I could ever fathom, and as I crawled backward toward the sliver of light, the last thing I heard was a chilling whisper echoing throughout the chamber. "You will never escape. We will always be with you." As I scrambled on the damp floor, relentless memories of the faces pursued me, each gaze a dagger of icy fear plunging deeper into my heart. The child's laughter rang in my ears, mingling with the growls of the abhorrent creature as it advanced, darkness swirling around it like a cloak of malice. With every desperate flicker of light illuminating my surroundings, I clung to the hope that there might still be a way out. The narrow passage beckoned me, a sliver of escape amidst the overwhelming tide of horror. My fingers found the jagged stone, slick with the blood and tears of the lost, digging into the earth as I lifted myself onto trembling legs. I hurtled toward the opening, ignoring the sharp pain coursing through my limbs. But with each frantic step, the shadows tightened around me, constricting as if sensing my desperation. The monstrous figure let out a guttural growl, repugnant breath wafting toward me like a rancid fog. "We're just playing hide and seek," it taunted, a sickly sweet tone that dripped with malice, sending shivers racing down my spine. In my periphery, I could see the child standing just beyond the creature, her eyes glinting with unholy delight, a smile that cut through me like a knife. As I reached the passage, I turned to look back, heart thundering against my ribs. The creature had halted, its grotesque form a mass of writhing shadows that flickered like dying flames. It seemed to be waiting for me to make the first move, a predator reveling in its control. Panic surged, as I realized the way out might be a trap, a mere illusion to lure the worthy prey. Suddenly, the ground beneath me quaked violently, the marks of time revealing themselves, faded silhouettes now carved into the cavern walls, whispering softly in a language long forgotten. I could hear them clearly now, a mournful lament that spoke of fathers who lost their children amidst neglect, mothers who had followed hopelessly, and echoes of laughter turned to screams as they became part of this unspeakable nightmare. With renewed panic, I dove into the passage, pushing myself forward against the slick stone. The light seemed to pulse ahead, a beacon pushing me onward, but as I crawled, the darkness surged, greedy for my warmth. I could feel its fingers trailing close behind, icy tendrils wrapping around my ankles, dragging me back into the depths of despair. I moved faster, driven by sheer primal instinct, clawing at the ground as the whispering shadows hissed ominously. The passage widened, opening into another chamber, a smaller, suffocating space filled with remnants of lives lost to this darkness. Eerie dolls with cracked porcelain faces gazed up at me, their lifeless eyes holding fragmented truths. Each one was a child, forgotten and forsaken. Remnants of laughter now turned into eternal silence. Light flickered feebly above, illuminating a pedestal at the center of the room. An object rested atop it, glistening and pulsing as if a silver locket, tethered to the very essence of hope that had been torn from countless souls. But as I crept closer, my heart sank. The faces that swirled in the darkness began to emerge, melding into one being, a horror that was no longer just watching but reaching out. "Don't you want to see?" The Child Ellis' voice echoed, filled with mock eagerness and desperation. "Don't you want to find us?" I hesitated, dread soaking through me like ice water. My hand reached toward the locket, caught in an impossible web of conflicted thoughts. It promised salvation, but a terrible price hovered in the air. The clamor of countless voices escalated, mingling with the creature's growls as it began to rip the walls apart, as if sensing my hesitation. The shadows around me twisted more violently, each haunting figure drawn to the light, an involuntary magnet pulling me closer to the locket, their piercing eyes filled with longing and despair that forced me to look deeper. But the noise grew unbearable, the darkness shrieked, and I dropped to my knees, the locket's light pulsing synchronously with my heart as the walls trembled, cracking beneath the weight of desperation. "No!" I screamed, pulling away, the locket wavering just out of reach. Then everything shifted. The chamber lurched, and the grotesque figure loomed large in the entrance, a maelstrom of shadows swirling behind it, ready to stampede. "Game over!" It roared, and in that heart-stopping moment, the passage behind me collapsed, sealing off my only route of escape. That I was trapped. As I turned to face the shadows, I saw them converge, melding into a single vortex, swirling dark energy that drew me in. Hope wavered, replaced by despair. Something deep within me recognized the pull, an undeniable call to the darkness that whispered of a family, an endless embrace of torment and betrayal. With one last glance at the flickering locket, I was consumed by the abyss. And then, silence. The silence was shocking, an oppressive weight that settled deeply within the confined space, suffocating every lingering thought. I opened my eyes, expecting to find myself engulfed in darkness. Instead, I was bathed in an eerie, pale glow that flickered like a dying star. I was still in the chamber, yet it felt different, transformed. The air charged with a palpable energy, it sizzled with anticipation that I pushed myself to my feet, the floor vibrating beneath my weight. The echoing laughter of children rang through the air, their voices hauntingly joyous, far too bright for the graveyard atmosphere. "They're waiting for you," a soft voice cooed, disembodied yet tantalizingly familiar. My heart skipped a beat as I squinted into the shadows, desperately searching for the source. Shapes stirred in the corners of my vision, figures cloaked in darkness weaving between the flickering light and the deepening shadows. Each laugh was laced with the haunting timbre of a child's innocence twisted by despair. As I moved cautiously toward the pedestal, my pulse quickened at the sight of the locket, now spinning gently in place as if caught in an unseen breeze. Its once dim glow now pulsated erratically, pulling at my very essence like a siren calling a sailor to his doom. "Ella," I whispered, my voice tinged with fear as the memories of her kindness flashed through my mind, battles of joy overshadowed by this horror. "Is that you?" No answer came, only more laughter and echo that grew louder and wilder, spiraling into a cacophony of chilling glee. I staggered back, seeking refuge against the environmental walls that seemed to listen intently. At that very moment, I felt a cold draft slicing through the chamber, wrapping around me like a tendril, coaxing me back toward the altar of loss. The light emanating from the locket grew brighter, projecting images of fleeting moments that felt all too real: a family gathered at a table, a mother's loving gaze, a father's hand resting on a small shoulder, the happiness radiating from their faces as they laughed and shared secrets. But just as quickly as those memories materialized, they turned dark, morphing into images of screaming faces, bodies twisted and broken, the laughter replaced by heart-wrenching cries that echoed in the stone walls. "What do you want from me?" I shouted into the void, desperation clawing at my throat. The locket trembled, and with it, the shadows began to sway, coalescing into limbs and twisted figures reaching towards me, each one desperate to be seen, to plead their case. "Join us," they whispered, voices melding into one as a girl, once innocent and sweet, emerged from the chaos. "Help us find the ones who hurt us. Help us tell our story." Terror gripped me as I recognized the Facia girl with soft, curls of gold and bright blue eyes, the very image of innocence that had shifted into a grim visage of sorrow. "Two cannot," I stammered, instinctively stepping back, the weight of their desperation crushing down upon my soul. "I can't help anyone." As if triggered by my resistance, the laughter morphed into a chorus of howls and human screams pierced through the air, resonating in my bones. The darkness infused with anguish surged around me, blurring the lines of reality as it wrapped tighter. Suddenly, the walls of the chamber pulsed with a violent energy, and I was thrust backward. I fell against the pedestal, the delicate locket quaking violently, casting shadows that danced like demons upon the walls. In that fateful moment, the gathered remnants of the lost reached beyond the veil of darkness, their faces mixing and melding to form one grotesque vis-a-vis, a monstrous apparition neither male nor female, adorned with the fragmented essence of the forgotten. "Do you see? Do you see their pain?" It screeched, each syllable ripping into my consciousness like a razor. Its eyes, however, were as innocent as the girl who had once looked upon me with trust. "Only you can break the cycle." I felt as if I were drowning, the shadows grasping at my limbs, fingers worming into my mind. There was a blinding flash, and the world around me fractured, flashes of torment mingling with the sacred laughter I once cherished, collapsing into noise that consumed all thought. The room twisted, moments extending into eternity as I faced the truth: I was a part of this nightmare, woven into the tapestry of their suffering. But the horror didn't stop, it escalated. Just then, the childlike figure lunged at me, malevolent glee twisting its features. "Help us or join us," it howled, a cacophony of dread surging forth. In that chilling instant, I felt the ground shift beneath me, the very fabric of reality tearing open, and I was plunged into an abyss where memories and nightmares intertwined relentlessly. And then there was the shriek of a name, familiar yet distant, a name that seemed to unlock everything. Before I could grasp it, a vast shadow enveloped me, swallowing my scream, drowning any semblance of hope I had left. I was held in a grip of icy fear, the realization dawning that I would have to confront the very thing that haunted me most, me own truth awaiting revelation in this void of anguish. And then everything went black. The silence felt louder than the chaos that had preceded it, an empty void stretching out forever. The blackness seeped into my consciousness, thick and oppressive. I felt weightless, lost in a sea of nothingness, desolate, as if the chamber had consumed me whole, stripping me of more than just my physical form. My very essence felt ground into dust, and suddenly, the black began to pulse with faint light, a ghostly shimmer ebbing and flowing like a tide. I was drawn toward it, compelled to move closer, even as a shiver crept down my spine. The shimmering light swirled and coalesced into the shape of a familiar room, a once lively living room rendered grotesque and distorted. Images flickered before me, swimming in and out of focus like fleeting memories. I saw children playing with toys, laughter chiming like delicate bells. But beneath that facade, shadows lurked in the corners, lingering, restless. A sense of impending doom hung over the scene like a rain cloud unable to spill its burden. Where are you, Ella? My voice cracked as it echoed, swallowed by the darkness, drowning in a tide of grief that refused to relent. As I stepped deeper into the vision, a chill seized my heart. I could feel the presence of something watching, waiting, too conscious of my every move. Help us. A child's voice piped up, crisp and clear. I turned to spot the source and was greeted by a small girl with golden curls, the very spitting image of the innocent spirit I had glimpsed before. But as I knelt down to her, I could see past her bright blue eyes there was a shadow lurking beneath, festering like an open wound. Help us. Echoed voices whirled around me again, this time more desperate, a surge of shadows circling my feet like hungry wolves. We're trapped. We can't leave. Help us. Behind the girl, the shadows swirled and morphed, pulling away to reveal hearts stuck in a loop of despair. Their eyes were wide with terror, mouths open in silent screams. Their limbs twisted impossibly, their forms caught between agony and yearning, a grotesque dance of lost souls begging for salvation. You have to wake up. The girl screamed, a sudden fervor igniting in her small frame. Her voice rang with youthful determination despite the terror that encased it. I felt as if she were not just a victim but a leader, her eyes cutting into my heart, demanding recognition. You have to find out what happened. You must remember. With that, the light exploded, and I was thrown back into darkness. Flailing, I grasped at the tendrils of regret spiraling around me, the echoes of laughter now mingled with deep wails of suffering. What happened? Who are you? I cried, my voice barely making its way through the tempest of fears and whispered accusations. Remember, the darkness breathed, a slithering whisper brushing against my ear. You hold the key to the door. The night hides the truth of your family. Once again, the scene shifted, images blasting forth like rapid-fire conclusions. I saw faces, felonious figures cloaked in darkness, a family seated together, their laughter piercing through the chaos but tinged with something else, something sinister. And then it twisted, transformed as victims became perpetrators, blood staining white walls, and the laughter turned into horrific screams that echoed back. No. I bellowed, clutching at my head. This can't be real. Suddenly, in the eye of the storm, the golden-haired girl reappeared, glimmering as though she could yet guide me. You have to remember, Ella called you by name, she tried to save you, and in that moment of clarity, the shadows coalesced into an outline, a figure emerged, an adult casting a long shadow, malice dripping from their essence. I felt their presence choke the air, a parental embrace twisted into a horror novel, a protector turned predator. Welcome back, the figure rasped, the voice resonating through the darkness. I've been waiting for you. The room trembled around me, the walls pulsating like a beating heart. What have you done? I hissed, backing away, my instinct screaming danger as the malevolence coiled tighter around me. The shadows converged, blurring my vision, and just before I ducked into the void, the figure grinning, a grotesque, knowing smile revealing a cavernous void where compassion had once resided. Time to unfold the truth, they whispered, devilish intent curling around their words. The darkness swirled, twisting tighter as I braced myself, dread pooling in my gut like ice, and then I was overcome by a deafening silence before an echoing scream shattered the calm, a voice all too familiar, calling my name from the abyss. Miranda! It sang through the air, curling around me like a noose, pulling me back into the fray. Despair clawed at my heart as I recognized the voice of someone dear, yet overshadowed by the thick fog of darkness. Wrapped in the heart of this nightmare, the fleeting moment of clarity was lost in a whirlpool of shadows as the scream consumed me. Find the truth. It called, dissipating into fragmented echoes, each syllable plunging deeper into the void, and then, light exploded and memories rushed like a torrent, the past pushing its way back into my fogged consciousness. But before I could latch onto a single thought, a monstrous shadow lunged at me, its shape cloaked in death, booming laughter sending shards of ice into my veins. Welcome home, Miranda. And just like that, the abyss swallowed me whole once more. The void released me, spitting me into a different space, a place that felt achingly familiar yet marred by the weight of sorrow. The living room seemed real again, but the colors were muted, the air thick with desperation and decay. The shadows that lingered before were now bold, they loomed, twisting into grotesque forms that flickered like candle flames in a storm. Miranda. The voice cried out again, now edged with panic and urgency. I stumbled through the room, my breaths shallow, every inhalation a battle against the choking atmosphere. I glanced at the dilapidated furniture, once warm and inviting, now draped with dusty sheets and the remnants of forgotten memories. As I turned, a whisper, cold and serpentine, wound its way through the air, curling around my thoughts like smoke. They're here, they're watching. The shadows thickened, shifting ominously, their edges roiling with a life of their own, reminding me of the figures I'd seen trapped in the abyss. Who's watching? I yelled into the silence, my voice shaking. My heart raced, thrumming violently against my ribs as I fought to catch the echo of warmth that the girl's image had stirred within me. Ella! Where are you? Help us! The chorus of children's voices once more stabbed at my heart, intertwining with my fear. They're coming for you. Run! The walls began to quiver, their surface cracking like the surface of a parched desert. I darted to the window, hoping for salvation, but gazing through the grimy glass sent icy fingers crawling along my spine. Outside, a throng of silhouettes flickered under the pale moonlight, a haunted procession of faces twisted in anguish. Their eyes bore into me, voids where hope once flickered. Suddenly, a figure broke from the group, an adult man, stooped and trembling, his hands outstretched as if pleading. Help us, Miranda! He begged, his voice splintering like dry wood. The shadows roared around me, sending a jolt of terror coursing through my veins. No! You're not real! I shouted, clutching my head, the cacophony swarming until the cries blurred into a haunting echo, amplifying my sense of dread. Then came a flicker of light, too strong, too bright, illuminating the living room in an ethereal glow. I squinted against it, and through the brilliance, the familiar outline of Ella appeared, standing resolute. Her hair glimmered like spun gold, an angelic vision amid the encroaching darkness. You must remember what they did, she insisted, her voice steady but laced with an urgency that turned my blood to ice. Why are you showing me this? I asked, desperate, confused. What do you mean? The truth is buried deep, Miranda. You have to dig it out, she urged, eyes grave. Or you'll never escape. Behind her, the shadows writhed, warping into the horrifying specters of my past, restless, tormented souls stretching toward me. The laughter and cries erupted in a duality of sound, a mocking chorus that gnawed at the edges of my sanity. You have to open your eyes. You're running out of time. A pulse of fear shot up my spine, and as I glanced back toward the malevolence outside, I caught sight of something shifting in the gloom, a shape, far more menacing than the others. It lunged forward, a mass of darkness with hollow eyes that engulfed everything in its path, moving faster and faster, all too eager to claim its prey. Ella, help me! I screamed, terror flooding my senses, but the bursts of light faded slowly, leaving behind only that cursed figure advancing with a hunger that transcended the physical. Remember! Ella's voice was swallowed by a rush of tumult as the walls vibrated violently, threatening to collapse under the weight of centuries of buried pain. I turned toward her, desperation clawing at my throat, the shadows closing in tighter and tighter, and as I raced for her, I felt something brush against my back, a cold and clammy touch that sent shivers cascading through my very core. "Leave her alone," I cried, a plea drenched in fear, then spun around to confront the horror that had latched onto my soul, only to find the swirling shadows were no longer just whispering threats. They morphed into eyes, hundreds of them, flaring bright against the darkness, all fixed on me with a malicious glee, and just as I felt my feet slip out from under me, caught in the tide of despair, the walls erupted in a cacophony of screams that felt like knives against my flesh. "They're coming for you. You'll never escape." I lunged toward the golden light of Ella, reaching out with all I had, but the shadows screamed louder, swallowing the sound of my desperation, consuming my very being as I tumbled into their gaping maw, darkness returning with a vengeance, and then an unbearable cacophony of laughter, warped and distorted, echoed behind me as the walls of my reality crumbled like dry leaves. I was no longer just Miranda, I was a part of the despair, forever entangled, struggling against the shadows that clung like a second skin. The last thing I heard before everything went black was a chilling sound, a soft voice whispering, "You're one of us now." The blackness enveloped me, a thick, suffocating veil that clawed at my senses. I gasped, but no air filled my lungs. Instead, dread settled like a stone in my chest, pressing down with an insistent weight. I could feel the shadows creeping closer, their sharp edges drawing lines across my skin. Suddenly, images burst forth in my mind, horrible flashes of bloated faces and distorted screams, memories I wished to forget clawing back into my consciousness, compelling and relentless. In the distance, laughter echoed, a cruel, mocking sound that resonated with the cadence of lost childhood, thick with malice. I winced, wrapping my arms around myself, feeling the chill seep into my bones. I trembled, knees buckling as fragmented memories bled into the void, painting scenes of terror, of betrayal, of blood-soaked silence. With an effort, I forced my eyes open, where a gray haze materialized around me, shrouding an expanse that felt too familiar. It was the living room again, but now it twisted like a funhouse mirror, in which the boundaries of reality blurred with an insidious hunger. The walls trembled, sighing as if to echo the pain buried deep within their foundation that I was not alone. Shadows pressed in, coiling around me, whispering secrets in a language only they understood. "Remember," they hissed, "you brought us here." They shifted and pulsed as if alive, forming grotesque shapes, taunting me with familiar silhouettes, faces carved with despair. "Ella." My heart surged with the weight of her absence, battling against the suffocating fear wrapping around me. "Ella, please. Where are you?" The room responded with an eerie stillness, broken only by the muffled sounds of children's cries, a desperate yearning that echoed from beyond the reach of my understanding. They were beckoning from the shadows, voices that melded into a sepulchral harmony that gripped my soul. "Help us," a soft voice wailed, echoing from a darkened corner that pulsed with an otherworldly glow. I squinted into the darkness, and for a moment, I thought I saw a small figure, the outline of a child, lost and alone among the shadows, desperately reaching out. "Please," against my better judgment, I moved closer, my heart racing as I approached that haunting apparition. "What do you want?" I whispered, feeling the shadows tighten like a noose around me. "Help us escape. Find the truth." The whisper grew frantic, an imploration that pressed against my heart like a vice. "They won't stop. They never stop." The walls shuddered as if echoing the child's panic, revealing glimpses of something more sinister lurking beneath their surface. I felt the very foundation of this house tremble, as though it held secrets I wasn't meant to uncover. My surroundings twisted into surreal paintings of memory's happy faces, then grotesque laughter, spinning all too fast. I stumbled back, recoiling in horror as echoes of family gatherings twisted into snapshots of betrayal and bloodshed. Suddenly, the cries of despair turned to laughter, a cacophony of glee mingled with the screams of the past. A dark figure stepped through the shadows, grinning sharply, its teeth glistening in the murky light. I froze, caught in its horrific gaze, a pair of soulless eyes that drank in my fear. You thought you could escape? It taunted, voice as smooth as oil and thick with venom. No. I clutched my head in disbelief. Get away from me. I stumbled backward, away from the terror, but the shadows closed in, a creeping tide pulling me deeper into the abyss. Remember, it hissed, gliding forward. You were always meant to be part of this. Waves of anguish crashed over me, memories colliding with reality as flashes of violence assaulted my mind. My heart raced with a newfound terror, a dreadful sense of mania taking root within me. I knew I needed to escape. I had to confront the truth buried beyond the whispers. As if sensing my resolve, the shadow slashed through the air with a roar, and the atmosphere thickened, pressing painfully against my chest. No! I screamed, but my voice echoed like a ghost through the night. The room warped as the lights flickered wildly, and just beyond the shadow stood a door, thick wood with peeling paint, exuding a feeling of dread that heralded forgotten horrors. I felt drawn to it, a moth to a flame, heart pounding as I approached, every step a battle against the force pulling me back. I could hear whispers, pleading and threatening all at once. Open it, they coaxed, set us free. The shadows surged with renewed energy, their cries merging into a deafening roar. I reached for the knob, heart hammering in my chest, my fingers trembling as I braced myself for whatever lay beyond. But just as I turned it, a shrieking howl erupted from the depths of the darkness, morphing the laughter into something unrecognizable, something that locked fate and terror together. And then the door splintered open, the blinding light spilling into the room, washing over the nightmarish scene before me, a doorway to the truth, or perhaps a gateway to something far more sinister. As the shadows writhed violently, releasing a chorus of wails, I felt a chilling presence close in, breath hot against my neck, whispering, "You shouldn't have tried to leave. What I found on the other side would either save me or doom me to the very horrors I had sought to escape." I held my breath as I stepped into the light, uncertain of the salvation or damnation that awaited me. A surge of white light enveloped me, blinding in its intensity, pushing against the encroaching darkness like a living entity. For an instant, I was weightless before a rush of air filled my lungs, sweet yet tainted with the stench of decay. But as clarity returned, the saccharine facade of salvation quickly dulled, revealing a chilling tableau. I stood in what seemed like a child's playroom, frozen in time, a world tangled in delight and horror. Toys lay scattered across the floor, a doll's head turned slightly, its once cheerful painted smile twisted into a grotesque grimace. A small, wooden rocking horse swayed silently, as if stirred by unseen hands. And in the corner, a faded mural of a bright sun and blue skies loomed ominously, overshadowed by creeping vines that snaked their way across the walls, appearing like fingers ready to grasp me. "This can't be real," I gasped, my voice trembling in the silence. I dared not touch anything, too aware of how fragile this very illusion felt. The air stilled in a hungry expectation, holding its breath as if waiting for the narrative to unfold. Then I heard Ida's soft murmuring, barely perceptible at first, like whispers from children too afraid to speak. It grew louder, twisting around my mind. "Play with us," they whispered. "Stay forever." The words wrapped around my heart, drumming a rhythm of restless yearning. Panic clawed at me, and I turned to flee back through the door, but it had vanished, sealing me in this waking nightmare. I was trapped, surrounded by the vivid echoes of laughter that jungled against the horizon of my sanity. I ran to the nearest wall, pressing my hands against the peeling paint, hoping to find a way back to the living room, to Ella, to safety. But the surface felt alive, undulating beneath my fingers like a heartbeat. "Join us," a voice sang out, lilting and eerie. It belonged to a girl who emerged from the shadows, her form translucent, radiating a ghostly glow. The brightness highlighted her frayed dress and sunken eyes that seemed to seek something deep within me. "We can play forever," she coaxed, a hint of sorrow brushing her voice, as if she longed for the connection only the living could provide. "Why are you here? What happened?" I stammered, helplessly drawn into her gaze. "Once we were happy," she replied, a flicker of warmth dancing momentarily across her features. "Our family. But then the darkness came, and it took them all away, all but me." Her gaze hardened, shadowed by loss. "Now, we gather to remind you of what you've done. Confusion wrestled with an unnerving sense of recognition. What do you mean? I choked out, feeling the weight of her words constrict around my throat. The room trembled as shadows flickered at the edges of my vision, shapes pulsating with memories I couldn't quite grasp. You chose them over us, remember? She pointed to a stack of discarded photos lying haphazardly on a table, images of smiling faces, hands entwined under a sunny sky. But as I reached for them, the images morphed grotesquely, the smiling faces now contorted in agony. My breath quickened, realization crashing like waves against the shore of my mind. The family in the photos, they were here, trapped with me. Where is Ella? Where is she? I screamed, trembling against the impending collapse of my reality. Suddenly, a piercing wail erupted from the playroom, rising beyond the joyous echoes into a shriek that felt like a blade raking against my sanity. The children scattered into the shadows, their laughter now twisted and manic, rattling the framework of this dreamscape. No. Not again. I cried, collapsing to my knees, desperate to escape the festering fear bubbling within me. But then, my heart froze. The girl was gone, and in her place stood a large figure, obscured by darkness yet distinct in its threat. Leave them alone. It growled, the voice vibrating through the walls, shaking loose the memories drilled into my heart. You abandoned them, and now they want justice. You cannot escape your sins. Terror gripped me. No, please. I never meant, but it surged forward, a malevolent specter, and the room began to swirl, the very essence of reality disassembling around me, pulling me into a vortex of despair. The figure grew closer, its gaunt face illuminated by the dim light. You will pay, it rasped, the words crawling into my mind like worms. Just before I thought I would be lost forever, I felt a rush of icy air, a flicker of familiarity, and a distant, echoing cry called my name. It was Ella. Help me! She cried, her voice sharp and clear amid the chaos. With a shuddering gasp, I surged forward through the dark, reaching for her voice, desperate to pull it back into my world. But with each step closer, the shadows clawed at me with relentless fury. You cannot leave. They screamed, their shrieks blending into a cacophony of rage. Ella! I called out, feeling the very ground slip beneath my feet as I fell towards the heart of the darkness. And with that deafening cry, my world shattered around me, spiraling into infinite darkness, leaving only her distant wail echoing, haunting, and summoning, "Help me!" And in that moment, I understood there would be no escape. Not unless I uncovered the truth locked away with them, and with it, the dreadful fate that awaited me if I failed. The room lurched, plunging me deeper into despair as the shadows tightened their grip, whispering in unison, "Welcome home." Pain. It knocked the breath from my lungs as I gasped for air, consciousness clawing its way back like a dying ember igniting against the coldness of despair. I awoke in that accursed living room, now a twisted mirage of comfort turned grotesque. The air crackled with an ominous energy, eerie and weighty, pressing against my chest as I pushed myself to my feet. The familiar sight of the peeling wallpaper and dusty furniture now loomed around me with sinister intent, morphing shadows flittering in the corners, dark tendrils reaching out from the wall, whispering secrets only they knew. Ella! I shouted, desperation fueling my voice. Where are you? I could feel the walls tremble at the sound of her name, the darkness shifting, responding as if disturbed by a memory far too close to heart. "Help us, find us," echoed those haunting whispers, the chorus of lost children wrapping around my mind, binding me to their torment. But the shadows swirled violently, growing restless, dark forms emerging, not just any old shapes but twisted visions of family whose laughter once filled these walls, now reduced to ghastly visages painted in despair. They were faces I recognized, but it was the familiar smile of a small girl with golden curls that rooted me to the spot. A scream caught in my throat. Ella! Why did you leave us, Miranda? The whisper came from every direction, thick with venom, causing my heart to thunder against my ribcage. You brought this upon us. Confusion gripped the edges of my reason, memories flooded in, shards of glass cutting through the illusion. No, it couldn't be. I shook my head, trying to block out the reality of what I had done, the choices made in fear. You are not innocent, a voice hissed, and as I turned, I recognized the shadow of my own mother, her dulcet tone twisted into a grotesque melody of pain and betrayal. You chose them over us. They never loved you like I did. This wasn't my fault. I protested, anger blossoming within me. But the shadows converged yet again, swelling against the walls, feeding off my fear. I stumbled backward, my vision blurring as flashes of the past surged, the darkness bloomed thick and alive, swallowing me whole. Wake up. Remember what happened. The world splintered like glass, erupting in a brilliant flash that sucked me in, twisted nightmares striking chords of grief. A pulse returned, a fragile flicker of light guiding me through layers of obscurity. I was propelled through darkness, tumbling into memories I never wanted. Echoes rang of laughter shared, but just as quickly, they turned to screams, every heartbeat tethered to the horrors long buried beneath the facade of normalcy. I glimpsed a family gathered around a lighted table, bubbling with excitement. Only to watch as the scene splintered, blood-soaked and horrifying, laughter exchanging hands with guttural cries of despair. I was suffocating, the truth clawing back as echoes intensified, suffocating both my heart and mind, demanding acknowledgement. Mama! Cried a voice from the shadows, sending a chill racing through my spine, a child's voice forever lost within the chaos. Help us! I pressed my hands against my ears in a futile attempt to block out the chorus of despair. Nausea spun in my gut, heavy with the weight of guilt and fear intertwining in an unholy bond as the world swirled around me. The night hides the truth of your family, a whisper curled into my mind, a dark echo of everything I feared most. Miranda! A voice broke through the fog, sharp as ice, me mother's, filled with a deep longing that tethered me to the surface as I gasped for what I had lost. Help me! In that instant, recognition dawned. The faces of past families twisted grotesquely now stood behind me, but there was one figure among them, her golden curls radiating warmth and light, piercing through the suffocating darkness. Ella! I cried out, propelled toward her very essence, and in that moment, a fragile connection sparked back. The door, she gasped, voice laced with urgency, open the door. Please. You must remember. In an act of pure desperation, I turned my gaze toward the wall where the door had appeared, its surface pulsating, inviting, portraying an illusion of safety hidden within the chaotic whispers surrounding me. The darkness shrieked in protest, shadows clawing at my skin as I lunged at. I can't leave you. I fumbled with the handle, heart racing, memories cascading like a torrent. I felt it then, a presence, sinister and vast, trying to pull me back, all at once urging me to remember the truth that had binded us together, and then it hit me. The childlike figure that had haunted my thoughts, the one I recognized so clearly, was not merely a figment or a lost soul, but a memory, the child I had abandoned in a moment of fear, a moment of weakness that doomed her. I remember, I howled against the suffocation of shadows swirling violently. I abandoned you. What have I done? But darkness danced with glee. Join us, it sang as I clutched the door tighter, the laughter harmonizing with wails as the grip of despair closed around me. You thought you could escape? You belong to us. With a roar, I flung the door open, light spilling forth, bright and blinding as the shadows recoiled. A tumultuous sting of fear and loss fused into something reverberating with painful beauty. The chamber collapsed, a cyclone of agonizing memories spiraled as terror and guilt wrapped around my essence, clinging with all they had. Help us! My mouth formed the words, but the shadows roared, you will pay. Help us or join us. I stepped through the threshold, gasping for breath. And just as the darkness began to consume my very spirit, I cast one final glance back into the abyss, a parade of mournful faces swinging their shadows around me. And then, silence consumed my scream as I fled into that light, reaching for salvation that felt necessary, so vivid and impossible, but just as I stepped through I felt the rifts within my mind fracture, everything unraveling, and that single thread of life revealing a malevolent truth. Just as light enveloped me entirely, the last echoes reached me, a whisper forged in betrayal, you were never meant to leave. And then I was free, yet never truly escaping the haunting darkness that lingered, the eternal clawing of shadows etched into my very essence, ever present, always watching. The truth would always linger, and I was bound to return, back to the house where horror had unfolded a sinister welcome that would forever beckon me home.